Oh, I guess I should actually show the slideshow. All right, so here we go. So here's what we're gonna identify here today. And what we're gonna identify is we're gonna talk about perfectly price discriminating monopolies. That's what the focus is gonna be. But before we get there, I want to finish the efficiency information from yesterday, and that was on the bottom of page 14. We didn't have a chance to get to the bottom of page 14, so I'm gonna highlight what these are on the bottom of page 14. We're gonna talk about how surplus is different. Yesterday, what we talked about is the difference between price and output and profit, really, between pure monopoly and perfect competition. Now we're going to throw in, and we talked about efficiency, now we're going to throw in just the surplus piece of it. So if we look at the surplus, this is looking at perfect competition. So would you just graph an industry for PC, a perfectly competitive industry, and identify price and output, and identify consumer and producer surplus? Let's just do that first. A perfectly competitive industry, identify P and Q, and then identify consumer and producer surplus. This goes back to the end. This goes back to the beginning of chapter 4. This goes back a little ways. That's your beginning. So hopefully yours looks like this. It's a simple supply-demand curve. And consumer surplus is the area below the price, or below the demand curve, above the price. So that's consumer surplus. Producer surplus is the area below the price, below the equilibrium price, down to your supply curve. That's producer surplus. We did this prior to us doing price ceilings, floors, quotas, and taxes. So kind of bring that back. Now, if we look at this, if we add in a marginal cost here and add in a marginal revenue, which is MR and MC, according to this, I would be producing where demand equals marginal cost. This point here is allocatively efficient. Do you see any deadweight loss here? Nope, no deadweight loss, right? So this means that there is zero deadweight loss here, and we have maximum overall surplus. Maximum overall surplus. So that's the perfectly competitive side. Now over here for the monopoly, just graph a pure monopoly. I know it doesn't matter if they're earning a profit or not, but it'd be nice just to draw on the profit. Don't include AVC. Actually, you don't even need to include ATC for this example. Just do demand, marginal revenue, and marginal cost. Demand, marginal revenue, marginal cost. You can add the ATC if you'd like to do that, but it doesn't matter for this example. All right, that's what you should have first. Identify the price and quantity for that monopoly. And then what I'd like you to do is shade in the consumer and producer surplus and deadweight loss. So you just did deadweight loss, and you should know where that is. So identify the profit maximizing price and output. Ideally, you should all go to the MR and MC, and then you go all the way up to the demand curve to identify price and output. Shade in deadweight loss. Consumer surplus, that whole area. Producer surplus is that whole area. All right, so this just really looks at efficiency of surplus as we compare the two industries. And so this just looks like looks at perfect competition. This looks at pure monopoly. And so what we end up seeing here is we end up having deadweight loss, and we are not maximizing surplus. So because we have deadweight loss. And the reason why we don't is because the MR is less than our demand curve. And this is what we're going to kind of take a look at and do more things with this and do kind of a final kind of summary between the two. And then we'll jump into perfectly price discriminating monopoly. All right, so now we looked at, and if it's helpful for you to say, have to give you practice, that's the point of allocative efficiency. Right? And we are not allocatively efficient because our quantity is not producing there. And we don't even need to, I won't even add the productive efficiency on there. Right? But that's really what you're looking at. And so now you can identify consumer surplus, producer surplus, and deadweight loss on a monopoly graph. You can do that on a perfectly competitive graph as well. All right, so now what the challenge is, now the last thing I'll mention, is this, and I'm just going to have two different check understandings. I may have to assign those after this. It all depends on what kind of time we have at the very end. But I'm going to go through and highlight this information and kind of fill out this table. I want to fill this table out, and then once we fill this table out, I want to make sure. I just want to make sure we can see I'm in the right spot here. This is doing graphing is for a free response question, but when you get multiple choice questions, knowing how to graph something may not be as helpful. So this is kind of putting, adding words to it, and so when you can use that for a multiple choice question. But I want to highlight a few different things that we look at. So where is price determined for a perfectly competitive firm? Well, it's on the demand curve. And down here it's on the demand curve. And perfect competition is going to have a much lower price than pure monopoly. But if they're both on the demand curve, why isn't their price level the same? Right? So the fact is, even though they are both here, the reason why this has a lower price than your pure monopoly is because here there is no price effect here. There's no price effect. And so when there's no price effect, your price is further down that demand curve because you produce where demand equals marginal cost. And here you have the price effect. And so when you have a price effect, you end up charging higher on the demand curve, right? So a couple different things to be able to see from that. And the price, I will add to this, the price for this is only on the elastic part of the demand curve. It's only on the elastic part of the demand curve. You cannot have a price for any monopoly, revenue or profit, on the inelastic portion. It's only on the elastic portion of the demand curve. All right, quantity. Quantity, so this is a profit maximizing firm. That's all we have for perfect competition. And remember that you can't have a revenue maximizing. You can't have that for perfect competition. And where is the quantity set at here? The quantity is set at MR equals MC. And if we have a profit maximizing monopoly, well, we also produce where MR equals MC. But this is a much higher quantity than a pure monopoly for perfect competition. If you're both producing where MR equals MC, and I'll add in here a revenue maximizing is where MR equals 0, just to have that in there. Right? The reason why, even though that is the same as that, you still have a difference in quantity. And the reason is because you end up restrict your quantity due to the price effect. You restrict quantity due to the price effect. I'm just going to let that sit for a second. If you figure out what that means, what does it mean to restrict quantity due to the price effect? Can you figure that out? That's really kind of an analysis of why there's a difference in quantity. What does that mean? Restricting quantity means that you're producing less. And so if you think about it visually, well, if this is my MR and my marginal cost, if I start with perfect competition, I'm starting here. But that's when there's no price effect and the demand equals MR. But due to the price effect, your MR has to go this way, and so hence my quantity is restricted. My quantity is a lot less because my marginal revenue curve ends up making the MR and MC point happen, it occurs earlier. And so that's the key thing that kind of goes along with that piece right there. Just making sure you understand why that is. And I'm just going to add in here, that's the price effect. In case you're jotting down, that if you're jotting down that graph. The price effect is this arrow causing that to happen. All right, that's profit. Or that's quantity. Profit, price minus ATC times quantity. Price minus ATC times quantity. Same for both of them. But we're going to have a much lower profit for a perfect competition than a pure monopoly. But they're both, we find it the same way. But again, because we're able down here, we're able to charge higher prices at lower output, at lower quantity, that leads to higher profits. Right? Because we can charge a higher price up here as compared to perfect competition. And if I was to add in an ATC here, well, the difference is here's my profit for perfect competition, but this is the profit here for pure monopoly. So the profit ends up being larger because we're restricting that quantity. We can charge higher prices. Efficiency, always allocatively efficient, short run and long run. They're always allocatively efficient. And in the long run, it is only productively efficient. It's productively efficient and allocatively. Pure monopoly, never allocatively efficient. The reason why, because you can never produce where demand equals marginal cost. That's why it can't be allocatively efficient. Monopolies cannot produce over here. Why can't monopolies produce here? Because your MR is not equal to demand. Right? If you're going to produce where MR equals MC, that's great. But if demand's always more than this, these two cannot be equal if demand's always more than that. But this is where I produce. Well, my demand is always going to be higher than that. Right? So that's why this is the case. I can't produce there. And lastly, surplus, zero deadweight loss, maximizing overall surplus. Here we have the largest deadweight loss of any market structure. The largest of any market structure. So we would say that there's a higher higher overall surplus for perfect competition than pure monopoly. And when it has the largest deadweight loss, and the reason again is because of that two-letter word, the price effect. Right. So as you kind of we can compare it on a graph, and now we can just go side by side and compare these just two side by side, and see what the differences are with that. I'm just going to pause here. What kind of questions have come up because of that? Can you not? I try to write a little cleaner, a little neater than the first period people or second period people kept asking me what I was writing because I was trying to go too fast. Any thoughts? Questions? All right. So the last piece underneath there, you have a rectangle on your notes that says pure monopoly. It talks about profits in the short run and long run. The question I'll ask you about this is, how about with perfect competition? If all the firms in perfect competition are making a profit, how much profit does the perfect competition have in the long run? Perfect competition has zero profit in the long run. Why does it have zero profit in the long run? I'm going to give someone else a chance. Why does perfect competition have zero profit in the long run? Why is that? Look at
firms will enter the industry.
And how can they enter? Because that's right. That's what happens.
There's like no barriers.
There's no barriers. So when you don't have any barriers to entry, that means that firms can come in and take your profit. In a monopoly, do we have barriers to entry in a monopoly? In a monopoly, we have the highest. Right? You have a patent for 20 years. No one can come in. If the government gives you if they say that you're the only one that can sell this product, we have really, really high barriers. This is why when you think about profit in the long run for monopolies, theoretically, really, the short run profits equal the long run profits. It doesn't really change, theoretically. And what you need to be able to add in is the reason why monopolies have long run profit is because they have high barriers to entry. That's the key piece to put in there. If you only put this piece down, you're missing the piece of why this is happening. You're missing that piece of why that happens. And that happens because they have barriers to entry, which prevents other firms from coming in. So thus, they get to hang on to their profits. This is just a little bit extra information that you don't need to write down. But in actuality, your long-run profits are a little bit less than short-run profits. And the reason for that is because sometimes you have higher legal fees. Sometimes you have to advertise. You have to advertise more. Both of these different things increase your cost structure. And here's an example. I'll say this as an example. We're going to skip that. I'm going to do that a little bit later on. As an example of this, Xcel Energy. Xcel Energy is a monopoly. They're actually a regulated monopoly. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. Xcel Energy is a regulated monopoly. What else besides providing electricity and utilities? What else is Xcel Energy known for? What else is their name on?
Don't they have like a stadium?
Well, they have where the Wild play, the Xcel Energy Center. Why the heck, if you're the only provider of a good, why would you give all that money and all the licensing and stuff to have your name on it and pay the Wild and the city of St. Paul, whoever else, pay about millions of dollars? Why would you do that? Because they really wouldn't have to, right? But what businesses have to do is they have to, even though that they're a regulated monopoly, they're the only ones that provide it, they have to make sure that they stay in good standing and in good faith. Because in order for what we'll talk about tomorrow, in order for Xcel Energy to make more money, the government has to increase their price ceiling. And if they can do good things and show that we really care about the customers and care about the community and all that stuff, we have a better view of Xcel Energy. They wouldn't have to do that. But every year, they probably ask 2, 3, 4 times a year for the government to raise their price ceiling. And sometimes the government says yes. Most of the times the government says no. No, you're fine where you are. Right? But they're a giant company. They want to make more money. All right, so I think it may be someone in this class the other day. We're talking about price discriminating monopolies. So that would be the top of page 16. Right? So we're going to do a couple different things with price discriminating monopolies. And Tuesday, 2:33. Okay, good. We have 30 minutes. That's good. Here's a quick summary of what a price discriminating monopoly is. A price discriminating monopoly is when you can charge different prices to different people. And I don't remember who it was. Someone said, well, why wouldn't every business do that? Why would every business charge different prices to different people? And the fact is because there are 3 conditions that you have to meet in order to be a price discriminating monopoly. Now remember we talked about the barter system? We don't really have the barter system here. So we have single price monopolies. A single price monopoly means you go to Best Buy and you see a TV, the Sony TV that's $1,500. Everyone who walks in to buy that TV pays the same exact price. A price discriminating monopoly would mean that different people could pay different prices for that. So they asked, why wouldn't everyone do that? Because not every business is able to price discriminate because there are 3 different conditions that you have to abide by. And we're just going to quickly identify what these conditions are. So in order for a business to be considered a price discriminating firm, 1, they have to have monopoly power, which means they have the ability to influence price. They have to have monopoly power. And this is not meant to be a trick question. I'll pause while you jot that down. You have to have monopoly power. You have to have price-making ability. Not meant to be a trick question, but why? Why can a perfectly competitive industry not have a price discriminating firm? According to that right there. What's the characteristic of a perfect competition? Amelie? Right, because we said one firm has no influence over the price. They're price takers. So a perfectly competitive firm cannot price discriminate because they're a price taker. They're given their price. But if you're an imperfectly competitive firm, maybe you could be this if you have this, right? The other thing is you have to segment your market. Having the ability to segment your market just means that you can actually charge different prices to different people. That's what segmenting a market is. If you've taken a marketing class, segmenting a market just means that That means that you're able to, you have different segments. I have like this segment here, this segment, they all have similarities. What is probably the most common ways? There's a couple of most common ways that businesses are able to segment a market. I'll give you a hint. It's part of demographics. If any of you know what a demographic is, I would say in this classroom we have two segments. Actually, we have three different segments in this classroom. Gender is one. So businesses are able to charge women one price and men a different price. They haven't caught up to a gender neutral. There's not a gender neutral segments yet, right? As far as for price discriminating. So that's one. What's the other one? It has age. So so you're in one and I'm in a different one. And so that is the most different. That is the most common way to segment is through age and gender. And all we're talking about here is when you segment a market, there will be different demand schedules, like a different willingness for each segment. There's a different willingness, and so each willingness has has their own demand curve. And then if you merge them together, it actually creates one industry curve. Right, but an industry that can segment something by age and gender, they have monopoly power. They can segment. Any thoughts of businesses in Eden Prairie that actually do this, that charge different prices based on age and gender? Write an EP.
Could it be like a barbershop?
Yep, barbershop. You go into different types of barbershops or salons. It may say men a price and women a different price. They actually charge different prices. And is it because the hair is longer? No, this has been going on for 40, 50 years. And there was a time when the short hair was more the trend. Now it's all the long, it's more long hair is the trend, right? But just because, should he pay less money than Isabella because his hair is a lot shorter? No, because typically women, this is just the history of it, women are willing to pay more because there's more emphasis that culturally in society puts on the female hair than it does the male hair. That is society. It's societal pressures. So we're getting to the point now where some places, like I go to Great Clips to get my, because I just like to save money, right? So I go to Great Clips. Is that where you went to get your hair? You just got your hair cut. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so when we go there, it's not because my hair is really short, right? But it's just because I'm a male. That's why I typically can pay less prices. I will tell you that if you ask people who've cut my hair in the past, they would probably say, I wish I could charge you more money than I charge the females because I'm a little high maintenance when it comes to my hair. It is what it is because my hair is very pointy and it just comes straight out. And if you don't cut it straight, then it's really evident, right? And so now everyone's staring at my hair. I'm really feeling self-conscious. But for females, just because the hair's longer doesn't mean you have to pay more money. But that's just where society has put it. So that's one, haircuts. Where else? Right in Eden Prairie.
Buffets.
Say that again. Buffets and movies, both of them. You go to a buffet and they may charge one price for kids, different price for someone else, for like an adult or a senior citizen. And movies, you go to a movie theater and there's a kid's price, an adult price, and a senior price. That's price segmenting. You're paying for the same exact food at a buffet and you're paying for the same exact seat in the movie theater, same experience. That's what you're paying for. But when they charge you different prices, that's price segmenting. Not illegal. Because the third aspect is, there we go, is that you cannot legally resell the good. That's the third aspect. And so if Best Buy can't be because I can buy a TV and I can resell it. But a movie ticket, technically, I could buy a kid's ticket and I could turn around and sell it to an adult and make more money on it. But then really that adult can't use that ticket because it says it's a kid's ticket. So really, you shouldn't be able to do that. I know that you probably could get away with it. Haircuts, once you have the haircut, can't resell it because it's a service, right? That's weird. Airlines, right? Once you get a ticket for an airline, you can't resell it. The airlines are price discriminating monopolies because they have price making ability. They segment their market, and we'll use airlines as an example in a second. And you can't resell your ticket. And you can change your ticket, but you can't resell it. Right? I can't turn around and sell it to someone else and say, I don't want to go, I'm just going to give it to you. It's just not how it happens. You can't even give it to somebody because you legally can't get on the plane without having everything match. Right? And so the thought is that when you look at this, each segment would have a different looking demand curve as you go through there. So you have to have those three conditions in order for you to be able to abide by it. Now I'm not going to have you draw these. I'm going to kind of develop one and we're going to draw that together. What I want you to see from this is that this would be the airline industry. The airline industry has two segments: business class and the vacation or tourist class. I'm just gonna ask Maddie, Avery, do you have any idea when the tickets were booked for your vacation?
No, probably like September.
Probably like
October.
probably 4 or 5, 6 months ago. That's here. Does anyone have someone at their house that travels for work? Okay. Any idea, TJ? Any idea? Like sometimes does dad get mom or dad? Okay, dad. Does dad get home and say, "Hey, tomorrow I'm going to Chicago," right? It happens just like that. And so, and it's not, and why is this the case? Because businesses, it has a much more inelastic demand curve because they're not as responsive to changes in prices. Because I can charge a whole lot more price because your dad's not paying for it, right? Wells Fargo?
No, Post.
That's right, Post, right? So Post is paying for it. He doesn't have to pay a dime. Post pays for it, right? But if you go to tourist class, this is all about time. The more time you have, the more elastic a demand curve is. This was one of the test questions maybe, right? The less time you have, the more inelastic it is. And so this is why vacation travelers will book their tickets 4, 5, 6 months out in advance. The only time that's different for this kind of personal travel, and by the way, when you book a ticket, they don't say, hey, are you traveling for business or pleasure? Now, if you go to a different country, when you want to access the country, they may ask you, are you here for business or pleasure? But when you get the ticket, they don't ask you that question because it's all about time. If you book it within a couple of days, they're assuming you're traveling for business. Right, so that's kind of a different thing around that. And I'm going to go through here, and I'm going to look at this. So I'm going to, on that page, I'm going to create a demand curve here. I'm just going to blank this out. This light's giving me a headache standing in front of it the whole time. I'm going to graph what it looks like for a perfectly priced discriminating monopoly. But here's the challenge. Do you all have a pencil to use for the graphing? Everyone have a pencil to use? Okay, because you may end up doing some erasing while you go through this. You don't necessarily have to do the erasing. All I'd like you to do is do this. Put a downward sloping demand curve. We're not even going to have an MR. The MR is going to be kind of non-existent for this, for right now. But I would like you to, just for simplicity, would you add a perfectly elastic marginal cost curve? And if you remember what a perfectly elastic curve looks like, not what it looks like, why it is. This means that if I wanted to sell something, there's an additional marginal cost, but it's not a greater and greater. Like a typical marginal cost looks like this, because if I want to make more and more things, I need more and more resources. Remember that this is an example. When you have a perfectly elastic demand curve, this is like Netflix. It has the algorithms already set, the whole software set. You just enter your email in there and different things, and you'll be able to, every single person has the same kind of cost to it. So here's one step. Now you can add in this. Would you add in 2 different price levels? So here, I'm just going to say this. I'm going to put a B on there for business travel, and a P for business travel, and then add a different price point a little bit lower. And I'm just going to say a V for vacation people. So this is like the airline industry. And then we're going to identify it. And if you're going to shade, I want you to shade lightly, and then you're going to be doing some erasing. So if you don't want to do any erasing, wait until I'm done, and then you can kind of see what it's looking like. But I'll have you add a few different things in. If this is one price point, what is this area up here called? Wallace, what's this? This is consumer surplus. What's this? Not quite. Well, here, we're producing all the way over here. This is also consumer surplus. Why? Because here's a different price, and so all of these people are willing to pay that price, but they only pay this price. Right? So that's consumer surplus. This over here, Cooper, that's deadweight loss. According to this graph, according to these two different price points, they're only producing this quantity. They're selling this many tickets. So this is how the whole thing starts. And what we're going to do is I'm going to add in. So in your notes, what you have is you have this area on the right over here. I'm showing the camera, and I'm also showing you. We're going to add some analysis along the way, right, as we do this. So look at what happens when I add in a price point. Oh, by the way, what's all this then? What's that whole thing? If it's not consumer surplus, it's producer surplus. The whole thing's producer surplus. Look what happens when we add in a price point. I'm going to add one price point. What happened to this consumer surplus? Right? It's called again, this is from earlier on, when you add in a number of price points. When you add in the number of price points, what happens? First off, consumer surplus just went down. Producer surplus just went up. Those are two different things we can prove right away about what's happening. All right, consumer surplus went down. So really what there was a transfer of income. That's what it's called. It's a transfer of income from consumer surplus to producer surplus. So instead of the consumers benefiting, now the producers are benefiting. And now every time I do this, adding a price point and a quantity, this is now again producer surplus. And if I add one up here, producer surplus, consumer. And so every time I do that, the consumer surplus gets less, producer surplus gets bigger. But what happens if I add this price down here, price and quantity down here? What happens to this deadweight loss area? Maggie, what happens to that deadweight loss area if I add a new price point in here?
Do you get more consumer?
Okay, so now this becomes what? That's more producer surplus. This becomes consumer surplus, and I have a tiny amount of deadweight loss. And so as I keep doing this, the amount of your deadweight loss actually decreases if I add to my quantity beyond where I was. So this is kind of a big picture. This is a big picture. What we're going to do is we're going to flip back and forth between pages just to make sure it makes sense. So now that we look at every time we add price points, consumer surplus drops, producer surplus goes up. What's happening to profit? If I was to add in this as ATC here, what's happening to my profit every single time I add a price line? Profit goes up. We're making more and more money. Why? Because I keep adding more prices. I keep adding more prices here. The entire producer surplus, all the producer surplus equals profit. Because this is the price that I'm getting. This is the price, this is the ATC. And so now what I'll do is I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to flip your page. Flip your page on the left-hand side. On the left-hand, and we're going to ignore what the information is at the top. On the left-hand side, all I want you to do is draw this graph here. Your demand, and do the same thing that we just did, marginal cost ATC. But I'm going to add a couple different points. This point down here is my quantity. And I'm going to show how this changes. I'm going to show how this changes. Now, above this graph, would you just put PPDM? This stands for perfectly price discriminating monopoly. PPDM. A perfectly price discriminating monopoly. If a price discriminating monopoly is the one that's over there, the first one was a two-tiered price discriminating monopoly. And when I added a third price, that's a three-tier price discriminating monopoly. But as we keep adding more and more prices, and if I get to the point if I can charge every single point on that demand curve, I would identify price like this. Your price is going to be higher and lower. Your price is going to be higher and lower compared to, if you just compare it, like if we compare it to a pure monopoly, we're going to say prices are going to be higher and lower. And what is this entire area in here? Okay, this entire area is profit, and it's also producer surplus. Because look at producer surplus kept growing and growing and growing every time we added things onto it. But if we get to a point where we can charge every single price, our quantity is way over here, but my prices are high and low, so the entire thing is it. So here's where again we're connecting some dots. What is going to be true about a perfectly price discriminating monopoly if they can produce at that point right there? What's going to be true? What's going to be true? Look at where they're producing. What's equal to each other? Hanley? They're allocatively efficient right here. Why? Because they're producing where demand equals marginal cost. Right, so these are the different dots that we're trying to connect. Right, we try to connect these dots so you can see that we talked about allocative efficiency for perfect competition, for pure monopoly, now for perfectly price discriminating monopoly, and tomorrow we'll talk about allocative efficiency with natural monopolies. Right, so but this is what we see, and here's what, just for the sake of argument, let's do this. Add in just just add in a marginal revenue curve. It doesn't matter what it looks like. Add in a marginal revenue curve. I'm just going to put down here PM, because a perfectly price discriminating monopoly is not going to have this. They're not going to have that. This is for if this was a pure monopoly, here's what a pure monopoly would be. That's the one price for a pure monopoly. That's the quantity for pure monopoly. That whole area is dead weight loss. So boy, if a business could price discriminate the way that this is the true barter system. If you could truly do this, you'd be making a giant profit. But only certain businesses can, and we don't have any business that are perfectly price discriminating monopolies here in the U.S. Because we don't have any businesses that can charge every single person a different price. Someone earlier brought up, a different period brought up insurance. Insurance is another kind of price discriminator, because they will charge for auto insurance, they charge females one price, males another price. Statistics prove that women cause less damage, and so insurance companies don't have to pay as much out. That's changing now, by the way. By the way, the gap is shrinking between what the difference in pricing is. Used to be bigger, but now women are driving more aggressively, and when you drive more aggressively, you cause more damage. So that means men really aren't changing how they're driving. Women are driving more aggressively. And why is that changing? Because 40 years ago, not as many women were driving. 50, 60 years ago, women were just in the kitchen, not working, right? 50, 60 years ago, women were in the kitchen, not working, so they weren't driving. So the rates were really different at that point. Now, because it keeps changing. Does anyone know what the age is that the insurance really goes down for you? When you get to be what age? Anyone know that? 25. You can stay on your parents' insurance policy until you're 25 years of age. And then once you're 25 years of age, magically, your insurance goes down by about like a third. I think like a third or so. Why? Because statistics prove that if you're 25 years of age and older, especially for the males, their frontal lobe is fully developed now. And so they will be more responsible drivers. Why? A lot of times because you now have family. You have other kind of things, right? You're just more responsible at that point. So when you hit to be age of 25, so there's age discrimination with insurance as well, as you look at that. All right, so this is kind of the summary of really what we look at as we try to understand how do we graph perfectly priced discriminating monopolies. And so what I'll try to do here, we have about 5 or 6 minutes. I'm going to quickly highlight for you. Actually, you know what? Actually, what I'll do is I won't do this. Here's what I'll show you. Just because our time is running low, and I'll give you some time for I'll give you some time for this. Right on the slideshow, there you have this table. I have a key for you. Oh, that was pretty good. I have a key for you. And so this is on the slideshow. I'll leave this here, but there are two different check understandings. There's one for perfectly priced monopolies, and there's also one for the efficiency. So we got a little bit of time before we have until 33. So I'll let you, if you want to either jot this stuff down, you can do the check understandings, but I'd want to have those done. Yes.
Is it possible for a pure monopoly to be protected by
Yeah. Yes. This would be a typical situation. I'll say this. Possible. Yep, possible. And we're gonna maybe on Wednesday or Thursday, we're gonna graph a few different ways to do this. All right. So I'm gonna stop there. Those at home, I'm gonna pause this and go away from where we are and peace out. All right. So I can do this. And so I'll let you, and I'm sorry I can't show that right now. You can look at the slideshow to finish it, or you can do the check understandings, because then Cora's going to hit in 5 minutes, and you may be able to actually finish both your CYUs. Pure Monopoly